Hey Collective, happy Pisces blood moon lunar eclipse, which is so metal. I love that name. We've got the star here as the significator tonight, and that's because there's a few things in Pisces right now. So we've got the full moon moving through Pisces. We have the North Node, which just flipped from retrograde into direct, and Saturn, which is retrograde right now. And I don't know if you can tell from the sound of my voice, but I'm sick. So this is going to be a good test run for the mute button on my new microphone, which my previous little clip-on ones didn't have. And the North Node going from retrograde to direct is really interesting to me, in tandem with the eclipse. Because the way I kind of view those eclipses, people talk about them as doorways. I think of it as like an eye that's opening of when we're given opportunities to learn, to grow, to be brave, so on and so forth. What do we do with them? Like it's just sort of a not a test per se, but a chance to look at those aspects of ourself of when given what I'm asked for or what I've asked for, what do I do? Yeah, what do you do? You just want more chicken. So we'll start with the star here and start getting some cards for that. And so we also have, I'm using the Oracle of the Radiant Sun for a Moon in Pisces and the Saturn in Pisces. So let's get the first card here. And it's funny, I've been pretty down for the count with whatever this little death virus is. I think it's just a cold. It's a sign it's cold and it's making me miserable. Because it's taken up residence in my sinuses. But I've been antsy to get back to the table and do a reading, which is not how I feel about my day job. It's funny. It was just a funny opportunity for reflection of, oh, this really is how I feel. You know, this is what I want. And away we go towards the North Node. So let's get that first card. More cards. So we've got 10 of Pentacles, 10 of Coins in this deck, in the Anatomy Tarot. And the Knight of Blades, Knight of Swords. So in the upright, the Knight of Swords would be the reckless, impulsive hero. So in reverse, this is more pumping the brakes, taking your time, because you want that 10 of Pentacles. And rarely is that easy to achieve, unless you were fed from a silver spoon. You have to earn each of those pentacles yourself. And maybe in the past, because I'm thinking of this from the perspective of, because I had planned on reading the star card in reverse, but since the North Node station direct, I'm reading it in the upright. And so maybe this is a shift from previous ways of doing things, where we would have just charged forth into the fray without thinking, especially if your money's at stake, your material resources. And beyond that aspect, you can look at the material as the body. So it could be your health, your physical health. And fighting for that in almost like, I know it's swords, but a fiery way. Someone who isn't quite battle tested yet. Like, they're still kind of naive, but they do have the chops to go forth boldly. So what do we have here? 4 of elixirs, 4 of cups, and the the 9 of blades, swords. Apathy and nightmares. Maybe there was some apathy that was becoming a nightmare. Could have got comfortable in your situation over, let's say, since the previous eclipse, some sort of longer term duration, since the Knight of Swords is in reverse. But just kind of examining your environment, like what I was mentioning about, I don't get antsy to go to the day job, I get antsy to do this. And then that anxiety builds and builds over time to where it starts negatively impacting your sleep, negatively impacting that physical health. And it's so easy to say in a one-sided, pre-recorded conversation that no job is worth your health, your stress, your worry, and so forth. Well, impulsively leaving something can create new problems, like what about your bills and things like that. And I know I get really frustrated when people tell me, like, have you considered, just upending your life? Like, there's reasons I'm continue to stay where I am. It's not as simple as I can just leave, even though I'm not happy. Not being able to pay any of my bills will make me even more unhappy. It's sort of a rock and a hard place situation. And I see a lot of like toxic positivity, spiritual bypassing and whatnot in tarot land of, if you think it, you can do it. And I love the optimism. I love the attitude. And capitalism is poison. It keeps people trenched in place. And the people at the bottom of the pyramid of whatever respective structure that they're operating within, it's simply the next layer up can be a victim to their ego. But then the worker is subject to that, of the only thing that makes them feel good about themselves is like lording over their serfs. Because they've got, I don't know, problems at home, or they don't have a passion project, or didn't address their trauma, things like that. Whatever the cause may be, the issue remains, though, that you have a boot on your neck. And that regardless of what is going on in that person's individual personal life, your livelihood shouldn't be subject to their mood. And yeah, if you want to know more about how I feel about that, check out my Labor Day reading. That was about unions. Let's get a little more clarity on this star here, the North Node. And another thing about that, like the eye opening, because we've got that, this was just the lunar eclipse in Pisces, and the next one, right around the fall equinox, is going to be a solar eclipse in Virgo. so the south node. That's an interesting progression there in a short time. But I don't like to necessarily make predictions, so it's just a, what do you do when presented with opportunity? Path A, path B, a choice point. Like, I kind of wonder about celebrities and whatnot, and how, like, the attention and the money and whatnot, it can, like, really distill aspects of your personality. And I would not be an exception to that. I like to think that I would be able to maintain my morals in the face of temptation, but that might not be true. If you've never had access to vast amounts of resources, or even just enough to get out of survival mode, which feels like astronomical right now, who do you become? Like, are you ready to face your capacity for flaws, your capacity for wrongdoing? I don't know, something to think about. Resistance. Oh, we got 2. And it took a little while to come out there. So Mercury in Taurus, and resourcefulness. Sun in Cancer. That's interesting. So Mercury in Taurus, slow, deliberate communication. It's like this little fern is growing. What was that movie? How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Our love fern. Oh, and that's interesting. That's an interesting metaphor. When she originally, at the beginning of the movie, she wanted to write something like politically charged and whatnot, but it was like a fashion magazine, so it was out of place. But she took that interesting idea of how to lose a guy in 10 days and ran with it. Like, what are you like when you're trying to lean into the flaws? And that was some resourcefulness on her part, of, even though she wasn't in the right environment to, write that brilliant moving piece about whatever issue was important to her, she was still able to engage her creativity. And what a Piscean vibe. Like, what a vibe. I love that movie. I'm not super into chick flicks, but I like that one. Oh, that's still hot. Oh. It feels good on my throat, though. So let's look at empathy here. Moon in Pisces. Illusion and emotion is what I'm getting from that. Like, being able to recognize that emotions are a temporary state, that they're valid, that they deserve attention, they deserve a stage, whether that's privately or in any sort of, like, interpersonal problem solving, conflict resolution, so on and so forth. But they're not logic. And if you're making a really important decision, you might need to check the, Delulu is a Solulu, Pisces land, and pump the brakes a little bit. Yeah, we've got the Five of Coins here. Because that's like that impulsivity of, I'm unhappy at my job and whatnot, and then like maybe you go out drinking with your buddies after work, and they're like, "We hate your job. Like, why don't you quit?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna send my job an email. I've had 3 beers and blah blah blah." Don't do that. Wait. Like, even if you're hellbent on quitting your job, you can quit tomorrow. You don't have to quit like right this moment. Like, you can take a breather, you can sleep on it, which I would recommend, especially if something is going on that's really emotionally charged and it's pissing you off, you're getting treated poorly. Like, just sleep on it. And what's the saying? The best time to look for a job is when you have one. And, maybe there's some personal bias coming through here just with what's going on with me. But I feel like it's going on with a lot of people. Like, the craziness with, in real time, watching prices go up when they really don't need to out of some of these bigger box stores and stuff. But just the one thing that doesn't seem to go up is wages. And I've been watching this trend for like 10, 15 years now of like, okay, what about us? This is like the longest time ever that we've stagnated like this. So I don't know. And the jobs report that just came out, there are more people than jobs right now, I think is how that happened. Three of Swords, Three of Blades. And it did a little topsy-turvy. So it was upright, now it's in reverse. And these look gnarly. These are the post-mortem tools and such for like a mortician. Interesting combination, though. So, through that acknowledgement of your circumstances, whether it's work or we're talking about health here since we're still in Pentacles, just the acknowledgement that there's an issue can bring you some relief. Or even that it's a situation that you need to leave and you know you need to leave. Or it might even be a situation that you need to leave for your health, which I totally relate to. Like every so often, I want to say 5-6 years ish, maybe even longer than that, but I'll have these major health crash outs that each one gets a little bit worse. Each one gets a little bit harder to withstand. And I think, as I rapidly approach middle age, that's one component of it, but it's just like the stress builds and builds and builds, and we don't have sufficient leave time here for anybody's health. And so you're just jumping from situation to situation because you're in survival mode, so you never really get to fully come all the way down. And that's hard on the body. But knowing that there's a problem and knowing that you need to make major changes, whatever that may be, it gives you a path. Even if you can't walk that path right away, it's like planning out a road trip. And that action of planning can help get you looking up at the horizon again, get your eyes facing forward, and give you something different to focus on rather than just simply withstanding the storm. Well, that flipped pretty fast. Actually, I'm going to take all three. So we've got the Ten of Wands. The burden will be put down, but it is indeed a burden. The Chariot, movement. 5, 6, 7. Seven of Cups, Seven of Elixirs. Illusions revealed, because that's reversed. And Seven of Cups. That card has an association to Nefarious. For anybody who's familiar with the Ars Goetia, anything like that. But the restoration of lost honors. And I think the Zodiac Association, Scorpio? I don't know if that's actually to the card or to Nefarious, but... So that could be some timing. So maybe you've just recently, or over this last eclipse cycle, over the summer, that break in between them, you've come to the conclusion that changes need to be made. Okay, now we gotta make movement, and maybe you're gearing up to launch in or around October to try and set this burden down and move forward into the unknown, whatever path you've decided to pursue. And it's important too, you got to take care of you. I know how hard it is to have to remain in situations that aren't good for you because you're surviving. And do what you have to do to maintain your mental health. And it's about what works for you, not what other people think should work for you. Because a lot of people got a lot of opinions about how others who are in situations they are not should operate. Let's get one of these here. For dropping the burden and moving forward. Adaptability. The Bear Grylls meme. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. Moon in Gemini. And this looks like Kali. So Kali and Shiva. And this reminds me a lot of Ra's sun barge that goes through the underworld at night. Oh, and that was the other thing. I'd originally planned on reading the star as in reverse. It was the descent into the underworld, because we're coming up on the fall equinox, so that association to Persephone, and the star has the association to Ishtar and Nana. And you can interpret that as like the dark night of the soul. That reckoning that you have with yourself in the individuation process of, oh, this isn't me. This is a facade I've had to maintain to live, to survive. And I've just been going through the motions, following a script that I didn't write. And that is hard. That is a really uncomfortable process. when all that stuff comes up to the surface and says, hey, it's time to deal with me. I don't know why it happens around like midlife and whatnot. But those major changes, who was saying something? The Chiron return, like right around when you're like 50 years old, something like that. That is near, like in the neighborhood of when midlife crises happen. So that wounded warrior aspect to it. And Chiron is in Aries right now. Retrograde, I think. But let's look at loss. Saturn in Pisces. And so Saturn is retrograde through Pisces right now. It was in Aries for a bit, and now we're back into Pisces. So I'm reading this as, I hate the phrase blessing in disguise, but it's like the loss that isn't a loss necessarily. It's the loss that leads you to the gain. And I don't want to bypass whatever loss that may be for you, whether it's a job, a marriage, anything like that. That's hard. Those are really hard to go through, even when they're bad fits. And it's a necessary change in your life. Like this imagery here reminds me of a plantation. And the way people defend those structures and Confederate monuments and whatnot without any kind of consideration as to what the black community went through, it's like flying it in their face. And so maybe these are uncomfortable truths of what you need to reckon with. Flaws in yourself. Flipped over right on that. Flaws. 8 of Swords in reverse. Yeah, taking the blindfold off, of examining the shadow material. And if you're having, because it's uncomfortable to just sit there and be like, what are my flaws? When, like, try and think about examples in your life situations that you met someone and they just irked you. They just rubbed you the wrong way. What are the similarities between them and yourself? Still uncomfortable. Still an uncomfortable thing to look at. But it's like a way to get started, you know? Because some of these like journal prompts and whatnot, or people talk about journaling as a tool for mental health, which I think it's a great one. I'm somebody that needs a prompt. And so in a blank journal, I might do a Dear Diary format. I can't just start. Like, I need something. So let's get another card here. What is the loss about? That, I'll take all 4. So we have the moon in reverse. So both the illusion cards in reverse, a lot of stuff being revealed. Knight of Coins, 2 of Swords, and the Ace of Rods, Ace of Wands in reverse. So I almost feel like these two are associated, and these two are their own message. But that's blindfold off, seeing beneath the surface, nothing to hide. That is the shadow work. That's the how do they put it? The shadow material coming up into the ego space. If you want to get real technical. But do that mindfully with how much is coming through at once. It can get really, really overwhelming. If you're interested, active imagination is something that Carl Jung talked about. The Red Book is where that's really examined. That's really heavy reading. You can find a lot of YouTube videos of that really summarize active imagination well in a much shorter space. Eternalized, I think, was the channel. Found a good video on. But we've got the slowest night in the deck. So I kind of feel like that points to that midlife timeline of we've reached a more seasoned stage in our life where we know ourselves a bit better. And we've come to a crossroads of which path do I go down? Do I pursue the almighty dollar? Or do I pursue my passions? And the idealist in me wants to believe those are the same. That you can make the living through the passion. And that's not true for everyone. Not everyone gets the opportunity to go down that path at all, or to even make money off of it. And I think it's a travesty how much creativity we're losing to labor. And that might be what's represented here in that Ace of Wands being in reverse, that loss of creativity. And it's not necessarily a loss. It goes on standby. Like there are some things that are, of course, like perishable skills, like drawing and painting and anything really technical and dexterous. But you can knock the dust off. You can start again. And you won't be starting completely from scratch, but maybe temper the expectations that you won't be picking up right where you left off. Like there's going to be a little bit of a oh, we're going back and then forward. And it could take a while, depending on what skill you're trying to recover. That might be a slow process. But I would encourage you to take one step before taking no steps. And especially if it was really physical, stretch first. It seems silly to say, but oh my goodness, starting my day out with like a quick yoga video, something like that makes all the difference. And I feel way too young to like even be noticing that. I don't know if I'll ever feel my age, but whatever. I just feel like me. I feel like an adult with a smoking permit. Or a child with a smoking permit, rather. There we go. Flattery. Venus in Gemini. Huh. Two sides of the self, that twin aspect. But it's interesting, these two faces are facing away, and these two are looking at each other. I don't... Is it a rowan tree? Or mistletoe, maybe? So there might be some confusion. And depending on what your situation is, not a race. You know, there's no quiz at the end. The person, in many cases, not all, but pressuring you to do things by a certain time is you. And that's coming from this like false belief in society that we have to own a house by a certain time, or have married or get married and have 2.5 children and 3 Jack Russell Terriers or whatever, white picket fence, whatnot, by a certain time. But what if you don't want kids and you don't want a house? Like, what if those aren't authentic to you? What if you just don't have enough money for a house? Like, how is that in this economy? Like, how is that a reflection on you? I don't see how that's personal accountability when the systemic failures are aplenty. But that identity shift of individuation, really seeing yourself for who you are, for what you want, what you believe in, what you value, what your principles truly are, not what you've been fed. That can be perceived in a really interesting way from the outside. And it might require some loss that isn't a loss. And if you're talking about interpersonal relationships, that can come across very callous of, you know, I had to move away from this person because it was better for me. And that doesn't always sit well with the person on the other side of the table. That's not a fun conversation to hear. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person or anything like that. It's just like an incompatibility in many cases. But it still isn't fun. It still doesn't feel good. So a lot of identity themes coming through. But that, I don't know, I kind of see individuation, that process, as destiny. What you do with that destiny is up to you. But that's that quote from Carl Jung, that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I believe that wholeheartedly, because not everybody gets a chance at that. And the situation does not have to be perfect for you to be who you are. So one day at a time, one step at a time, mind those Piscean impulses, and I say that with love as a Pisces stellium. And I just recently found out I also have Pallas Athena in Pisces, in addition to the other 3 placements I have in Pisces, because I'm a Pisces sun. We've got the Lunar Nomad Oracle here. I thought that was appropriate for the eclipse. And so these eclipse cycles are about 6 months long, because we have these first 2 in the series, the lunar and the solar, and then in March are the next 2. So an opportunity to I don't know, maybe set some goals for those 6 months of what would you like to accomplish towards whichever goal you're trying to pursue. Whether it's finding a new job, maybe leaving a relationship, maybe finding a relationship, starting up a new project, something that's more you. And you could also use that 6 months to examine just the natural pull in your life. Like, where's the resistance? Where am I feeling that grind internally that might clue you in as to where transformation may be needed? So we have woman and heart. And immediately from that, I'm getting queen bee. So taking charge and going forth with confidence that you have the worker bees, the soldier bees. I'm sure there's others, but backing you and invested in your success, because their success is somehow interdependent on that. So maybe you work in some type of leadership role that doesn't necessarily have to be management or something like that. You could just be a leader in the community. Maybe you do social justice work. You volunteer. You're leading food drives, things like that. Donation drives, whatever that may be. I'm just kind of examining the expression on her face. Oh, and there's somebody like in the corridor there. Kind of looks like a keyhole. So that almost looks like the shadow to me, like a representation of that. Or it could be unwanted, unsolicited opinions about your transformation. Because when people go through midlife crisis, as it's called, which I don't love that term, people jibber jabber about that stuff, and not always in the kindest of ways. That, like, oh, this person's out of control and whatnot, and people don't like change. In many cases, if people are operating from a subconscious or even an unconscious place, they might make suggestions in favor of keeping you in that rut. And it could be coming from what they believe, what they earnestly believe to be good advice from a good place. And it could still be harmful advice to you. So that's kind of what I'm feeling from this expression. It's not that lip curl there, kind of like there's a little tension on her nose, like pulling it up a little bit. Like she's being polite, listening to what these people have to say, but she's still going to go her own way. Which I am totally in favor of. And, of course, listen to Fleetwood Mac. It's always the right choice. Let's get a song here. Oop. What did we get? Amen by Hailstorm and Passenger by Deftones. I think Deftones has a new album out that I need to listen to. But I mean, Passenger, that's from the White Pony album. So, talking about addiction, that's something you're struggling with, of course. I recommend seeking professional help. Therapists, support groups, there's often free support groups that you can find in your area. Sometimes they'll be online if you can't attend in person. And amen, hailstorm. These big transformations also tend to come with an examination of faith. And it doesn't mean you need to change how you feel, what you believe. And it's okay to change how you feel, what you believe, because that goes back to what I'm saying about people don't like change, and they'll make recommendations for you that will keep you in the same spot when it's just to keep you in this mold, in this, like, crabs in a bucket. I don't know. I don't know if it's because they don't want to face the need to change, the desire to change might make them uncomfortable. Maybe there's some insecurities about you being able to change where they've stagnated. And I would hope that would just be like a cue of, well, if they can do it, I can do it. You know? But that's my idealistic Pisces heart. But overall, I hope this helps. I hope this resonates, and if it doesn't, I hope the next one does. Thank you so much.